Mr. Modeling, and welcome to, I guess, another short video. Really, the short video worked out really well, and I had a question asked to me, and I thought, what a great project, we can do this all at the same time. So what the deal is I got asked, how do I go about scratch building? And if you've never scratch built, well, I guess that's a fair question. So obviously this bridge is being built. The back end is not here because I'm doing some work on it. But I thought what I'd do is at least go through, I'm going to be working on the freight house, and I thought I would at least address how I go about that. Now, like I said, most of these models here are just placeholders. Union Station is going to be Union Station. That's going to change. This building right here is a placeholder for the creamery that's next door to the Union Station. So that is kind of about how big I want that to be. It's not exactly the building, but it's a good placeholder for it. I've got this Monster Model Works bonded freight house here because that's roughly what I'm going to be doing here. And I could use that if a couple kits, but Monster Models is no longer in business, so it's not really going to be conducive to what I'm going to do. And again, remember, I'm kind of trying to prototype a little bit. I want to get the feel of it. And because I have some actual drawings, which I'll show you, I can work from that. So what I'm going to do now is basically get an idea of how much space I'm going to use. So by using my tape measure here, and I've already kind of determined this off camera, that I was going to build this freight house, or this freight deep area here, is going to be about 40 inches long. And that 40 inches is not how big this freight house is. I have already calculated this out. I'll get 11 of the 16 doors onto this thing. It's much bigger than that. It's actually a little bigger than 40 inches, but it works well. And I'm going to have to compress it some, but I don't want to compress the garage doors. I want to keep those about the same size because that lines up with this bridge. This bridge is actually built the same width as the actual bridge. So to keep that 3 garage door opening underneath the bridge, I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to keep the bridges about the same. The doors of the garage doors the same size, but what I'm going to do is compress the building some and only do about 11 buildings. I'm also going to take the head house for the freight area there, and I'm going to compress that. Ideally, it would be about 12 inches. I'm going to compress it down to about 8 inches. So what I'm going to end up with is 8 inches of the head house, and then I'm going to end up with 32 inches of freight house behind it. So that's kind of how I'm laying this out. That's kind of how I've worked this out. Now, the boring part that we didn't video here was just that. Me sitting here calculating and doing that, taking the actual measurements of the buildings and what I have from the drawings and photos and things like that, and kind of working it down. So now I'm going to show you the drawings and the photos that I did, that I'm working with, so that you can see how I begin the process of starting to draw the building out. So 1 second here, we're going to move to my computer so you can see it, because frankly doing it on the computer makes it easier for everybody to see the pictures nice and clearly. So hold fast. Okay, so here we are at the computer, and the first thing we're going to show you is these drawings. These are the drawings I got from the Library of Congress. Now this makes this a much more easier scratch build if I have drawings like this. They're not exact, but they are at least, they're not, you can't build a building off of this, but it gives me enough information that I can begin to start scratch building. I have the photograph here, I have the scale, I have the head house here, I have how long everything is, I have the bridge sitting on top of that, and I have the scale down below to work with, these 2 scales. So that allows me to begin the process of figuring out how much space between the doors, how tall are the doors, how tall is this awning from the loading dock, how tall is the loading dock, how tall is from the window top or the window bottoms or to the top of the building. And it gives me some basic shapes to begin to work with. The other thing you can use is you can use photographs, or go, if you have them. Now in the case here, I do have some photographs. Give me a second here, I'll pull one up. This is a photograph from around 1960, 1970 of the bridge over top of the freight house. It doesn't give me a lot of detail, but I can work with this a bit, and I do have some zooming capabilities if I want to take a little closer and see how certain things look. It's not perfect, but it gives a real good feeling for what I'm looking for around here. I mean, I can see roads right here, and I can see the loading dock and get a little feeling for what that might look like. The other thing I can do is I can go to Google Maps, and in this case, this is the actual building. Now, obviously, this is the building photographed in the last year or 2 or 3 or whatever, when last time Google went out and took the photograph. This is the correct building, and if you compare that to the drawings, you can see that it kind of matches. So that tells me that they have not modified this building too much. Obviously, they've changed the front a little bit, like this work in here and some other things. Probably this sidewalk is much wider, but the chop house has pretty much kept this in the same format as it was when it was in operations. The other thing that's kind of handy is I can look at the freight house from the side here, and I get, again, a really good idea. Now, these windows might have been changed, because from the drawings that I have here, the windows look pretty close to the same thing, so it's a good chance that they maybe modernized them, but they didn't change them that much. The other thing is it gives me, you can see downspouts and things like this, which probably never changed, and different things like that. Now, I do know that here on the end of the building here, where this screening and all that you see over here, and this up on top, and obviously all that kind of stuff, if you take a look at the drawing here, you can see that it looks like they originally had the building extending out over where the door 1 for the freight house would have been. So there's been some changes, but it's really hard to tell what. Unfortunately, short of spending a lot of time going out there and doing some more research, probably physically on site, it's going to be a little more challenging. The other thing is I can take a look at this from the back side of the freight house, which you can see here. This is the awning right here. This is a new apartment complex that they built. Now, this may have been built right next to it, and that this is the track side right here, would have been through this area through here, but I've got a good feeling with it, what it should look like, especially on the end, this end portion that would be visible on my layout. This side into here, there used to be 2 of these back right next to one another, and it's really hard to tell because they turned this into a parking lot, and so it's really hard to tell where the second one would have been, but it does give me some information that's really kind of helpful. And then finally, let's see, I think I've got another view here. This is again from the looking west, and you can see again the head house here, and then all the doors and everything from the freight house right back here. So this is really a lot to kind of begin to start the process of scratch building. Now from this, I can then begin to start making some basic shapes, and this is the basic shape. So if we look at the drawing here, there are 24 doors on this, and I'm only putting 11 in mine, but it gives the feel of it. I matched the 3 wide. My bridge will fit right into here, and these doors are spaced appropriately for the distance that it's according to the drawings that I have. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm beginning to figure out how I'm going to cut my MDF to what length. I have MDF in 24-inch length, and this measurement from here to one end is probably, this is about 20 or so inches across here, and then this one will be a little shorter for my 32. So this one might be 12. The reason why I made the cut here is because if you look at the drawings, you can see that in between the doors, I've got a mullion that sits right up and down here on each one of them. So I want to make sure that my cut of my MDF falls in between this point, because then I can take my mullion and glue it right over the seam so that it will look like it's one continuous building. So a lot of the beginning process of scratch building is figuring out how you're going to hide cuts or how you're going to put things together. I've done some brick buildings before, and as I go through this process, and I'll share later on what I kind of go through and how I figure it out. But right now, I just want to give you just the basics of what I'm doing. So that's what I have for right now for the drawings and the photos and everything that I'm working on. And I hope this works out. This is a little easier format. I don't have to edit nearly as much. So until next time, happy modeling.